Let me tell you a story about a man who changed the world. Out of the 100 billion people who have walked this earth, Napoleon Bonaparte stands as one of the most influential in all of history. The birth of a Corsican child. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769, on the rugged island of Corsica, a land caught between mountain peaks and the endless blue of the Mediterranean. Just months before his birth, Corsica had been conquered by France from the Republic of Genoa after years of bloody resistance led by the legendary Pasquale Paoli. When he was 9 years old, Napoleon left Corsica for mainland France to attend military school. His notebooks were filled with sketches of fortresses and troop formations. By 16, Napoleon graduated from the École Militaire in Paris as a second lieutenant in the artillery. It was a prestigious posting, but advancement in the French army at the time moved at a crawl. In 1789, the revolution erupted. Bread prices soared, peasants rioted, and Paris became a city of barricades and mobs. The old monarchy crumbled, the king was executed, and the guillotine became a grim symbol of the new age. To Napoleon, the revolution was a double-edged sword, chaos and opportunity in equal measure. Napoleon's first taste of true fame came in 1793 during the Siege of Toulon. Royalist rebels, aided by the British and Spanish fleets, seized the city and handed over its harbor, one of France's most vital naval bases. France's revolutionary government sent troops to retake it, and among them was a 24-year-old artillery captain with sharp eyes and sharper ideas. Napoleon proposed a daring plan: attack a key fort at night, capture its guns, and turn them on the enemy ships in the harbor. The plan worked. He personally led the assault, sword in hand, even taking a bayonet wound. The British fleet, under heavy bombardment, was forced to withdraw. Toulon was retaken, and Napoleon, now promoted to brigadier general, was hailed as a rising star of the revolution. He agreed to take command on one condition: total control over the defense. With only hours to prepare, he positioned cannons at key choke points. When the rebels advanced, he gave the order to fire. Grapeshot tore through the streets, scattering the attackers. The uprising was crushed. Overnight, Napoleon went from a sidelined officer to the savior of the Republic. The Italian campaign, from rags to victory. In 1796, Napoleon was given command of the Army of Italy, a ragged, starving force, more used to retreat than victory. When he arrived, his soldiers had no boots, no pay, and little hope. Standing before them, Napoleon promised glory, wealth, and victory. "Soldiers," he told them, "you are poorly fed and almost naked, but I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world." True to his word, within weeks he smashed the Austrian and Sardinian forces in a whirlwind of battles. Over the next year, he won 19 out of 21 engagements, forcing Austria to sign the Treaty of Campo Formio. In doing so, he redrew the map of northern Italy and cemented his reputation as a commander who could turn despair into triumph. The Egyptian Gamble. By 1798, Napoleon's victories in Italy had made him the darling of the French public and a threat to the politicians in Paris. The Directory feared his growing popularity, but they also knew his ambition could be turned to France's advantage. They offered him command of an expedition to Egypt. Officially, it was to strike at British trade routes to India. Unofficially, it was a way to send him far from the political heart of France. Egypt in the late 18th century was a land of ancient mysteries and strategic importance. Napoleon set sail with 40 troops, but also brought along 167 scholars, scientists, engineers, artists determined to study the land's history, culture, and resources. It was an unusual army, one carrying both bayonets and telescopes. At first, the campaign was a success. At the Battle of the Pyramids, Napoleon's forces faced the Mamluk cavalry warriors famed for their skill and fearlessness. Forming massive infantry squares, the French repelled repeated charges, the smoke of musket fire mixing with the desert heat. "Soldiers," Napoleon told them before the battle, "from the heights of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you." The Mamluks were crushed, but his triumph was short-lived. At sea, the British Navy under Admiral Horatio Nelson struck a devastating blow at the Battle of the Nile, destroying most of the French fleet. Napoleon and his men were stranded in Egypt, their supply lines cut. After a failed invasion of Syria and facing the spread of disease among his troops, Napoleon decided to abandon the army and return to France. He left quietly, knowing that in Paris, events were moving fast. The coup of 18 Brumaire. When Napoleon returned in October 1799, he found the French government in chaos. The Directory was corrupt, unpopular, and unable to control the country. France's enemies were regrouping, and the economy was in shambles. Seizing the moment, Napoleon conspired with key political allies, including his brother Lucien, to overthrow the government. On 18 Brumaire, year 8 of the French Revolutionary calendar, November 9, 1799, Napoleon and his supporters staged a coup d'état. Soldiers loyal to him surrounded the legislative assemblies. Amid shouts, confusion, and accusations of dictatorship, Napoleon took control. Within days, he was first consul of France, the most powerful man in the nation. Rebuilding France, Napoleon was not just a military genius, he was a reformer. In the years that followed, he reorganized the French legal system, creating the Code Napoleon, a set of civil laws that influenced countries across the world. He established the Bank of France, reformed the tax system, built roads, and founded schools. To ordinary French citizens exhausted by a decade of revolution and instability, Napoleon brought order and progress. Yet he was no pure democrat. Power was centralized in his hands, and his rule grew increasingly authoritarian. In 1804, after uncovering plots against his life, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French in a lavish ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral. The act was symbolic. By placing the crown on his own head rather than letting the Pope do it, he declared that his authority came from himself alone. Master of Europe, from 1804 to 1809, Napoleon's armies dominated Europe. At Austerlitz, in 1805, he faced the combined forces of Austria and Russia in what is considered his greatest victory. Using deceptive troop movements and exploiting the terrain, he shattered his enemies in a single day. The Austrian Empire was humbled, and the map of Europe shifted once again in his favor. He established the Continental System, an economic blockade aimed at crippling Britain's trade. Across much of Europe, rulers either allied with Napoleon or were replaced by his relatives and loyalists. His brothers Joseph, Louis, and Jerome were placed on the thrones of Spain, Holland, and Westphalia. The Napoleonic Empire stretched from the Atlantic coast of Portugal to the plains of Poland, but power bred resistance. In Spain, a brutal guerrilla war supported by Britain drained French resources. In Central Europe, Austria and Prussia plotted revenge. And in the East, Russia remained a restless ally. The Russian disaster. In 1812, Napoleon launched his most ambitious campaign, the invasion of Russia. He assembled the Grande Armée, over 600 soldiers from across Europe. Crossing into Russian territory, they won initial battles, but the Russians refused decisive engagement, retreating deeper into their vast land while burning villages and crops. By September, Napoleon reached Moscow, only to find it abandoned and set ablaze. With winter approaching and supplies running out, he ordered a retreat. What followed was a nightmare. Freezing temperatures, starvation, disease, and relentless attacks by Russian forces decimated his army. By the time they staggered back across the border, fewer than 100 men remained. Defeat and exile. The Russian disaster emboldened his enemies. In 1813, a coalition of Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Sweden defeated him at the Battle of Leipzig, the Battle of Nations. By 1814, Allied forces entered Paris. Napoleon abdicated and was exiled to the Mediterranean island of Elba. But Napoleon was not done. Less than a year later, he escaped Elba, landing on the French coast. As he marched toward Paris, soldiers sent to capture him instead joined him. "Soldiers," he called out to them, "if there is one among you who would kill his emperor, here I stand." No one fired a shot. Thus began the 100 Days. Napoleon's return alarmed Europe's rulers, who quickly formed the Seventh Coalition. On June 18, 1815, near the Belgian village of Waterloo, Napoleon faced the British under the Duke of Wellington and the Prussians under Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher. Heavy rain turned the battlefield into mud, slowing French maneuvers. Napoleon's attacks were fierce, but met with unyielding resistance. Late in the day, the arrival of the Prussians sealed his fate. Defeated, Napoleon abdicated once more. This time, the Allies sent him to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, a place from which escape was impossible. On St. Helena, Napoleon lived under constant watch in a damp, wind-swept house called Longwood. He spent his days dictating memoirs, arguing with his captors, and walking the barren hills. In May 1821, at the age of 51, he died likely from stomach cancer, though rumors of poisoning have lingered ever since. Even in exile, Napoleon shaped his legend. His memoirs portrayed him as a man of destiny, misunderstood and betrayed by lesser men. And across Europe, people argued, was he a tyrant who drowned the continent in blood, or a visionary who spread the ideals of the revolution?